What would you do if the person you loved the most was also the one you were supposed to stay away from? Welcome to Happiness of Love, your daily dose of K-dramas. Get ready to fall in love with unforgettable stories. Can you tell us where are you listening from? The clock ticked mercilessly as Kate Park stood frozen in the doorway, her heart racing like a wild stallion. Laughter echoed from the living room, a sound entwined with heartbreak as she clutched her phone tightly, fighting the urge to hurl it across the room. There he was, Dylan Kim, her stepbrother, her closest ally, seated comfortably beside Sophie Lee, a dazzling woman with a laugh that could melt glaciers. The sight pulled at the very core of her being, igniting a storm of emotions she had tried so desperately to bury. With every shared glance, every soft touch between them, Kate was reminded of the weight of her impossible love. Her childhood companion had morphed into something she shouldn't desire, yet here, draped in laughter and hidden smiles with someone who was not her, he felt impossibly distant. Protecting her heart from a family delicate as spun glass, she had carefully crafted an illusion of indifference. But every tick of the clock reminded her of the truth pulsing just beneath the surface, a truth that screamed for recognition. In her mind, she replayed their childhood, the years spent at each other's side, the laughter, the secrets whispered under moonlight. Each memory felt like a dagger, sharp and unyielding, as she watched him effortlessly charm Sophie, oblivious to the ache in her chest. She occupied the role of the perfect daughter, the supportive sister, and in doing so, she had convinced herself that love could be contained. Yet, here they were, Dylan's carefree laughter like a distant melody, while a tempest raged inside her, tearing at her resolve. She could no longer ignore the bitter truth. Seeing him with Sophie was like watching a sunset from the edge of a cliff, breathtaking yet perilous. It filled her with wonder while also dragging her into unfathomable depths. Determined to reclaim her life before it shattered, Kate took a deep breath, steeling herself against the rising tide of emotions. She had to move on, she had to find someone who could make her forget. As the evening wore on, conversations swirled around her, uninteresting anecdotes about work and travel. Meanwhile, Dylan and Sophie, seemingly entwined in their own world, drew even closer together, and Kate felt her carefully maintained facade begin to fracture. Finally, as the laughter rang out, sharp and joyous, she slipped away from the group, retreating to the sanctuary of her room where the walls could shield her from the laughter that echoed in the halls. Alone, with her thoughts rushing like waves crashing against a shore, she closed her eyes, feeling the familiar warmth of forbidden love clawing at the edges of her consciousness, daring her to confront it. She knew she had to face the truth but felt paralyzed by the fear of the consequences. If only she could shake off the tormenting whispers that reminded her of Dylan's warmth, his kindness, the way he made her feel safe yet so achingly distant. Staring at the ceiling, tangled in her conflicting emotions, she decided right then and there that she would let go of her feelings once and for all. As a resolution solidified in her mind, she opened her eyes to the darkness of her room, a reminder that even in absence, warmth could still haunt one's memories. But as she concluded her moment of resolve, her heart betrayed her with the echo of Dylan's laughter, and she couldn't shake the feeling that this was just merely the beginning of a confrontation that could change absolutely everything. One Friday evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of pink and orange, Kate found herself at a lively bar downtown, a place she had chosen to escape the weight of unrequited love. The upbeat music echoed around her, but Kate felt a strange disconnection to the revelry, her thoughts still tangled with the image of Dylan, who always seemed to occupy a corner of her heart that no one else could touch. Suddenly, amidst the clinking glasses and laughter, her eyes landed on Eric Choi, a strikingly handsome businessman. His warm smile and confident demeanor were magnetic, drawing her closer like a moth to a flame. As he approached, the atmosphere shifted, and for a moment, her worries melted away. Eric leaned in, his voice smooth and inviting, as he introduced himself with a charm that made her heart flutter unexpectedly. He said that he had seen her around and felt an instant connection, a sentiment that resonated deep within Kate's longing soul. Wanting to escape from the shadows of her impossible love, she felt a flicker of hope as she agreed to go out with him, her heart daring to entertain the idea that perhaps she could reclaim the joy she had buried under layers of silent longing. Their dates blossomed quickly, filled with laughter and shared glances that ignited sparks she hadn't felt in years. Each moment with Eric felt like a breath of fresh air. They wandered through the city's hidden gems, dining in cozy restaurants where candlelight flickered like the flames of her emerging emotions. With each new adventure, Kate found herself surprisingly open, sharing pieces of her life and dreams, feeling safe in Eric's straightforward affection, which stood in stark contrast to the confusing and complicated bond she shared with Dylan. However, unbeknownst to her, across town in a sleek, modern office, Dylan was learning about her new romance, the news piercing through him like a jagged blade. Sitting at his desk, he frowned as his assistant, recognizing his mood, casually mentioned having seen Kate out with Eric. Initially brushing off the news with a dismissive wave, he told himself that he was merely concerned for his little sister, reasoning that Kate deserved to be happy, yet he couldn't shake the tightening in his chest. As the hours passed, he could hardly suppress the unease bubbling underneath, stunned to find himself distracted and irritated by thoughts of Kate laughing too easily, her eyes sparkling as she interacted with someone else. It infuriated him, the pang of jealousy swirling within him, unanticipated and unwelcome. Dylan's protective instincts kicked into high gear. After all, he was accustomed to keeping a watchful eye over her, but this shift in their dynamic was unsettling. As days turned into weeks, the sights and sounds of Kate with Eric played in vivid detail in his mind, the laughter that echoed from their dates grinding against the parts of himself he had long buried. With every photograph caught on social media, every mention of their adventures, a familiar resentment grew like a shadow creeping into his perceptions. His irritation morphed into a desperate need to confront the reality of what was blossoming between them, yet he found himself standing back, wrestling with the confusion of feelings he had long labeled as brotherly concern. When he saw them together at a lunch with friends, the sight of Kate leaning comfortably against Eric sparked a tumult in his heart, leaving him grappling with emotions he could hardly understand. Their easy banter and occasional playful touch felt like a stark reminder of everything he was losing, igniting a glimmer of foreboding that threatened to expose what he had inadvertently suppressed for far too long. As the evening deepened with laughter and the city lights twinkled like stars, Kate found warmth in Eric's presence, momentarily forgetting the tumult of her past. And yet, deep down, she remained aware of the tension that lingered in the air, a bittersweet undercurrent that reminded her that love, in its many forms, could either heal or tear apart the very fabric of what she thought she understood. In this dance of newfound affection and jealous longing, both Kate and Dylan began to confront the truth of their hearts, unaware that the choices they were making would lead them down an unpredictable path laden with complications and desires they could no longer ignore. As their worlds collided, a storm brewed beneath the surface, revealing the fragility of the bonds that had once defined their family, each pulse of emotion echoing the unrecognized love that continued to grow, challenging the barriers they had both created to protect what had always come first: their shared history and family ties. The atmosphere at the family gathering was bright with laughter and the tantalizing aroma of homemade dishes filling the air, creating a sense of camaraderie that Kate had always cherished. She arrived alongside Eric, their fingers entwined, as they walked into the bustling living room filled with family and friends. As they stepped in, heads turned, and the warmth of shared affection radiated from them, energizing Kay, who felt a strange mixture of excitement and nervousness. Dylan watched from across the room, the sound of jovial banter becoming a dull murmur as his gaze remained fixed on Kate. Her joy was palpable, and with every soft laugh and loving glance exchanged between her and Eric, Dylan's heart sank deeper. He could hardly recognize his feelings as he grappled with the sudden influx of jealousy that knotted within him. As Eric playfully draped an arm around Kate's shoulders, leaving her cheeks flushed with a hint of pink, Dylan's grip on his glass tightened, the cool surface cutting into his palm as if to remind him of the tension brewing inside. It felt foreign and unsettling. He had always viewed Kate as his little sister, someone to protect and cherish, but this moment forced him to confront a growing realization that his feelings were far more complicated. He stared at them as they chatted animatedly with Aunt Minji, who cooed at their evident connection. The way Eric gently placed a hand on Kate's waist sent a jolt through him, igniting an unfamiliar anger that he tried to suppress. With every laughter shared between them, Dylan felt a storm brewing inside him. He questioned himself, why did he care so much? Why did the sight of her happiness with another man sink so deeply into his chest? That evening, as the party continued, he found himself drifting into his thoughts, replaying vague memories of their childhood, the times they would build forts in the living room with sheets, sharing secrets only siblings knew. However, now those memories took on a different shade, tinted with longing and a realization that the bond he once thought was purely familial was woven with a deeper thread. The sound of ice clinking in his glass echoed in his ears as he stared at the couple from a distance, desperately trying to salvage the familiarity of their relationship amidst the chaos of emotion threatening to unravel him. Later that night, when the guests had left and the laughter had faded into quiet murmurings of the night, Dylan sat alone in the dark, haunted by the way Eric had caressed Kate with such care. It was a simple gesture, yet to him, it felt like a devastating breach of a bond he was starting to recognize as fragile. Each memory of their time together, the gentle teasing and shared dreams, replayed in a heartbreaking loop that kept him awake, and he couldn't shake the feeling that he had been blind to the truth all along. It wasn't the sisterly bond he had always prided himself on, it was something deeper, something he now feared he had no right to acknowledge. As the days passed, Kate found herself leveraging her relationship with Eric as a fortress against the persistent ache of her unresolved feelings for Dylan. Their trip to Busan was a whirlwind of laughter and exploration, contrasting sharply with the claustrophobic tension that had been simmering at home. With every shared moment, from sipping fresh fruit juice by the seaside to the soft rustling of waves while they walked hand in hand, Kate began to nurture a budding hope that maybe, just maybe, she could claw her way out of the emotional quagmire that Dylan represented. The way Eric looked at her, his eyes sparkling with genuine affection, made her heart race, momentarily distracting her from the shadows of her past. They explored street markets, where the enticing aroma of tteokbokki wafted through the air, tickling her senses as she and Eric shared bites and exchanged playful banter. "You know," Eric remarked with a teasing smirk as he wiped a bit of spicy sauce off her cheek, "if you keep eating like this, we might need to book you a gym membership." She laughed, the sound bright and carefree, feeling a flicker of warmth chase away her previous sorrows. But as every sunset painted the horizon with shades of orange and pink, Kate would catch herself glancing at her phone, half hoping for a message from Dylan, a remnant of her longing surfacing against the otherwise peaceful backdrop of her new life. It was while scrolling through photos of their trip later that Dylan stumbled upon an image, its uncomplicated joy a stark contrast to the complex emotions swirling within him. Kate's radiant smile beside Eric sent a jolt of something resembling panic through him, a feeling he had never anticipated, one he had long buried beneath layers of familial duties and expectations. Each frivolous laugh captured in the photographs served as daggers to his previously steadfast resolve. It was as if each laugh echoed in his mind, reminding him of just how much he had taken for granted. The easy companionship that had defined their childhood, now clouded by an unbearable longing, gnawed at him, leaving him restless. He found himself obsessively wondering how he could have overlooked his feelings for Kate for so long. With Sophie, he tried to maintain normalcy, but his heart and mind were miles away, trapped in the siren song of Kate's laughter and the warmth of her presence, as he felt increasingly suffocated by the standard routines they once cherished. Their previous dates felt hollow, and even her gentle smiles morphed into nagging reminders of the love he could not claim. At the following family dinner, the atmosphere buzzed with laughter and chatter, yet Dylan found himself unable to fully engage. As Kate arrived with Eric, her laughter radiating warmth that wrapped around everyone present, Dylan felt a knot tightening in his chest. He watched them interact, a small part of him desperately wanting to join their merriment while another larger part, which dominated the space in his heart with primal jealousy, clenched tightly around him. Each time he glanced in their direction, seeing the affectionate touches exchanged between Kate and Eric, he was propelled into a darker mood. He felt a sharpness linger in the air as he made biting comments about Eric's success in business, cloaking his personal feelings in layers of sarcasm. "Must be nice to be the center of attention, huh, Eric? With all your charisma and that flashy suit of yours?" He sneered, forcing a laughter that felt more like a growl tumbling from his lips. Kate's ire sparked immediately, her temper flaring as she shot him a quick glare, the tension between them thickening like molasses. "Seriously, Dylan? Can't you just let us enjoy the evening without your commentary?" She responded, her usually soft voice sharp and filled with a steely edge that seemed to challenge his slightest provocation. His defenses crumbled momentarily under the weight of her piercing gaze, and there was something about that confrontation that stirred the air between them, leaving a delicate tingling in its wake. But just as quickly as it came, he deflected her challenge with a nonchalance, choosing to sidestep the heart of the matter once more, his heart racing beneath the surface as he plunged himself deeper into both jealousy and denial. Kate could feel the warm hand of frustration clenching her heart as she fought against the blend of affection and anger she felt for him. As the evening wore on and the laughter of their family dissolved into the familiarity of comfort, it became apparent to both Dylan and Kate that their dynamic had permanently shifted, forever entangled in unspoken emotions they could neither fully understand nor escape. As balloons swayed gently in the evening breeze and laughter echoed through the backyard, Kevin's birthday party pulsed with a contagious energy. The sun dipped below the horizon, casting warm, golden light that seemed to dance off the faces of family and friends, creating an atmosphere ripe with joy. Yet, amidst the celebration, Dylan Kim felt a storm brewing within him. His eyes flickered throughout the crowd, finally settling on Kate Park, who was standing beside Eric Choi, her boyfriend. As Eric leaned closer to Kate, preparing to kiss her beneath the fairy lights shimmering overhead, an unbearable weight pressed upon Dylan's chest. The sight twisted something deep inside him, igniting a fierce need to confront the emotions he had long locked away. Without thinking, he surged forward, feeling like an uninvited guest crashing a beautiful moment. He pulled Kate aside, the world around them fading as he focused solely on her startled expression. The scent of her hair, a mix of floral shampoo and something uniquely hers, enveloped him, intensifying the turmoil inside. He demanded roughly if she truly loved Eric, his voice low and tense. The intensity of his question caught Kate off guard, her heart racing under the weight of his gaze. She retorted sharply, asking why he cared so much about who she loved. Dylan's breath hitched, her question hanging in the air like an unresolved chord, and he hesitated, struggling to articulate the answer that lurked just beneath the surface. The tension crackled between them, electric and palpable enough to silence the bustle of the party around them. Kate's eyes blazed with confusion and hurt, leaving Dylan momentarily speechless as he searched her expression for a hint of his own long-hidden feelings and yet lacked the courage to confront them. The moment felt like a taut string ready to snap, and before he could reclaim a shred of composure, Kate pulled away from him, her footsteps echoing against the wooden deck as she stormed off, leaving him standing in a haze of regret and yearning. That night, as the stars blinked lazily overhead, Dylan tossed and turned, enveloped in dreams that blurred the lines between reality and desire. For the first time, he dreamed not of her as a sister or as family, but as the woman he had secretly cherished, her laughter mingling with the warmth of her smile as she reached out to him, drawing him into a world where nothing else mattered except their connection. Each dream sequence revealed his deepest fears and unacknowledged love, awakening something within him that would no longer be silenced. The moon filtered through his window, illuminating his clenched fists, as he realized that the dormant feelings he had tried so hard to ignore were now charging forth like a tide, ready to reshape the very foundation of their family and their lives. Kate sat on the edge of her bed, the weight of the confrontation with Dylan pressing heavily on her chest. She could still feel the intensity of his gaze, the way he had demanded to know if she truly loved Eric, and how it had shattered the fragile remnants of her composure. The uncertainty of her feelings swirled around her like a tempest. She felt as if she was standing on the brink of a precipice, suspended between a past she had tried to forget and a future riddled with confusion. The silence in her room echoed her inner turmoil, filled with memories of a childhood shared so intimately with Dylan, a childhood that now felt tainted by unspoken desires that threatened to undo everything they had built. Across town, Dylan was grappling with his own storm. Sophie had been the perfect girlfriend on paper, beautiful, successful, and charming, but with every moment that passed, he found himself drifting further away from her. He no longer wanted the comfort of their relationship. It felt like a cage, stifling him while the walls of his heart and mind bore the insistent marks of Kate's love that he had so long ignored. When Sophie finally confronted him about his distance, he struggled to find words, feeling like a man choking on his own truths. She looked at him with disappointment, and it cut deeper than he could have imagined. She was perceptive, catching on to his emotional withdrawal, and he found himself trapped between honesty and the delicate facade of their lives. Sophie's voice trembled as she spoke, expressing her heartbreak, and in that moment, he realized she was right. Whatever he felt for Kate had never been innocent. Meanwhile, as the evening wore on with its usual embrace of neon lights and bustling streets, Eric sensed a shift in Kate. They had shared laughter and tender moments, yet he couldn't shake the feeling that something was amiss. He sat across from her at their favorite cafe, watching her play nervously with the hem of her sweater. The shadows played tricks on her features, making her seem more vulnerable and distant than he had ever seen her. When he finally asked her directly if she was in love with someone else, his heart raced at the silence that hung thick in the air between them. Kate's eyes widened momentarily, and then they dropped to her lap, the unspoken truth lingering between them like a ghost. Eric felt a heavy weight settle in his chest as he recognized the shift in her demeanor, a painful acceptance dawning in his heart that he was losing her to the shadows of a love that hovered just beyond his grasp. The moment stretched, with every second amplifying the unsteadiness of their connection, and in that silence, he resolved to let her go if it meant she would find her way back to herself. Dylan found himself spiraling into a chasm of solitude and remorse, the guilt of harboring feelings for Kate weighing heavily on his heart. Each day felt like a battle against his desires, a constant struggle to maintain the facade of a protective brother while the truth gnawed at him from within. The thought of confessing to Kate and potentially tearing apart the family he loved left him paralyzed, yet the vision of her laughing with Eric plunged him deeper into despair. As his nights turned restless, filled with dreams of what could have been, he grappled with a longing that blended pain and hunger, forcing him to confront the truth he had long denied. Kate was equally ensnared by her emotions, her heart heavy with the realization that every moment spent with Eric felt like a betrayal of the love she felt for Dylan. As she walked through their shared spaces that had become a bittersweet reminder of her suppressed feelings, she found herself wondering if she could ever truly be happy while always looking over her shoulder at the life she desired but could never reach. When Grace approached Dylan one evening, her brow furrowed with concern about his distant demeanor, she noticed the flicker of conflict in his eyes. Dylan opened his mouth, the urge to confess lurking just beneath the surface, but just as quickly as he thought of breaking free of his internal chains, he clamped his lips shut, fearing the fallout of his revelation. Meanwhile, Eric had sensed the shift in Kate's affection, the way her laughter seemed less genuine and her smiles more strained. He valued their time together, but the shadows lurking between them had grown impossible to ignore. With a heavy heart filled with compassion, he took a deep breath and confronted her one evening, his voice steady as he asked, "Are you in love with someone else?" The question hung in the air, and though it felt loaded with emotion, Kate couldn't muster the words to deny it. In that moment of silence, Eric's expression morphed into one of profound understanding, and he knew he could not continue to be a placeholder in her heart. He told her that she deserved someone who loved only her, and the finality of his words sent her spiraling into a whirlwind of sorrow. Devastated, Kate watched Eric leave, feeling a mix of oppression and sudden liberation. She no longer had to hide behind the pretense of moving on, for the tangled web between them had finally been cut, but it left her feeling exposed and heartbroken. Instead of relief, a deep-seated turmoil raged within her as she confronted her true feelings unshielded, and the realization that she was free yet emotionally bound to Dylan was almost unbearable. In the restless nights that followed, she wrestled with the haunting thought that her love for him was a complex riddle, making her every smile feel like an act of treachery against both herself and her family. As Dylan sank deeper into isolation, he indulged in the searing guilt that came with every stolen glance he threw Kate's way, his heart aching with the weight of unspoken affection. The painful distance he placed between himself and Sophie only added to the sense of turmoil brewing within him. In the corners of his mind, he grappled with the fear of rediscovering the love that had seemed like a childish dream but had now materialized into something terrifyingly real. One evening, as he sat alone in his darkened apartment, shadows dancing upon the walls, he dared to imagine a world without the constraint of familial bonds, where he and Kate could freely explore the depths of their feelings. This thought both exhilarated and terrified him, creating an internal dichotomy that left him breathless. Amidst the silence of his solitude, he recalled the first time he had noticed the difference in his feelings, how her laughter pierced through the mundane and how her sorrow felt like his own. He had shared countless memories with Kate, but now each recollection felt imbued with a poignant sense of longing. The thought that he might lose her happily engaging in life with Eric was unbearable, and he couldn't help but feel that he had already lost a part of himself. As sleepless nights blended into silent days, the fear of the inevitable confession grew ever stronger, but the potential for their family's destruction loomed larger. Little did he know that in their shared turmoil, both he and Kate were inching closer to a breaking point. Both were tethered together by the intricacies of their emotions, a secret longing that burned hot beneath the surface, waiting for the heat of revelation to ignite it into something uncontrollable and life-altering. One evening, as the city lights flickered like distant stars, Kate returned home, her mind swirling with the residual thoughts of her turbulent feelings. To her surprise, she found Dylan standing outside her apartment, his silhouette framed by the soft glow of the street lamp. He looked different, a mixture of determination and torment etched onto his features, his hands shoved deep into the pockets of his jacket. The sight of him ignited a small spark of hope within her, yet it was quickly enveloped by the anxiety leaping in her chest. As she approached, her heart raced, and she could feel the weight of unspoken words hanging heavily in the air. The moment she reached him, she couldn't contain the curiosity laced with apprehension, asking him what brought him there at this late hour. Taking a deep breath that seemed to echo the gravity of the moment, Dylan looked into her eyes, the raw honesty reflected within them, and confessed with an urgency that seemed to freeze time, "I love you, Kate. And it's killing me." The confession shattered the carefully constructed walls around Kate's heart, sending shards of longing and fear cascading through her. Part of her had yearned for this admission, yet it felt like a dangerous truth that could unravel everything they knew. She felt the ground beneath her shift, her thoughts racing with the implications of his declaration. As the words settled between them, she whispered in shaky disbelief, "We can't." The desperation in her voice mirrored the chaos swirling in her heart, a plea to return to the safe, predictable world they had created together. Yet Dylan, drawn by an undeniable force, stepped closer, closing the distance between them. His eyes, burning with determination, searched hers, seeking a spark of understanding. "I tried to fight it. I tried to see you as my sister. But I can't anymore," he said, each syllable filled with a mix of anguish and clarity that struck her like a bolt of lightning. Overwhelmed by the weight of his words and the reality they signified, Kate felt the breath hitch in her throat, the truth she had buried beneath layers of denial crashing down around her like a tidal wave. Unable to confront the magnitude of their situation and fearing the risk of everything she held dear fracturing irrevocably, she turned and fled, her footsteps echoing in the stillness of the night. As she hurried down the dimly lit hallway, the truth he had confessed loomed behind her like a ghost, and the warmth of Dylan's presence was replaced by the chilling realization that she could no longer run from the emotions that had silently governed her life. In the safety of her apartment, with the door shut firmly behind her, Kate leaned against it, her heart racing as she struggled to catch her breath. The shadows in the room felt oppressive, as if they were pressing against her, suffocating her with the undeniable truth of her own longing. In that moment of solitude, surrounded by the quiet hum of the city outside, she was at war with herself, torn between the safety of their past and the undeniable pull of her love for Dylan, a love that felt both exhilarating and impossibly dangerous. Kate felt a heaviness settle in her heart as she moved through her daily routine, every moment weighed down by Dylan's confession. The echo of his words haunted her, replaying in her mind as if her heart itself was a broken record stuck on a single sentiment. Each time she sat in her favorite cafe or browsed through the shops downtown, she anticipated running into him, yet hoped to avoid the confrontation that would undoubtedly follow. The laughter of friends and the soft clinking of cups filled the air, distinct from the internal turmoil that brewed within her. She was acutely aware of the precarious balance that hovered over her life, an unsteady tightrope between love and turmoil. Deep down, she knew she loved Dylan, the kind of love that not only thrilled her but terrified her, a weighty truth that could uproot their family's careful harmony. How would her parents react? What about Kevin, her innocent little brother? The potential fallout loomed larger than life, pulsing like a storm cloud ready to burst. Meanwhile, Dylan felt a frustration coiling tightly within him. He respected Kate's need for space, even if every fiber of his being longed to reach out and erase the distance she insisted on maintaining. His heart raced with an urgency that made him restless, his thoughts muddled with the need to confront the truth they both shied away from. At the family gathering that weekend, he was on edge, his heart stuttering every time Kate laughed with someone else. He caught her gaze across the crowded living room, just a glance, but it felt like an electric shock. The air thickened with unspoken words, a silent conversation that only they could comprehend. The corners of his mouth twitched with longing as he noticed the way her smile seemed brighter, although it was mingled with a hint of anxiety. That admiration turned bitter as he recognized how easily she could appear happy without him. Later that night, the kitchen was dimly lit, a cozy sanctuary away from the prying eyes of their family. The scent of home-cooked food hung in the air, but it tasted stale in Dylan's mouth, overshadowed by his nerves. He leaned against the counter, the coolness of the surface grounding him as he watched Kate maneuver around the space. She looked unspeakably beautiful, even in her casual clothes, and the sight of her made his chest ache with that familiar mix of desire and despair. When the opportunity arose, he took a step closer to her, heart racing like a wild horse. "Tell me you don't love me, and I'll stop," he whispered, the gravity of the moment sinking in around them like a heavy fog. Kate froze, her heart racing as she felt the warmth radiating from him. The world outside the kitchen faded away, leaving just the two of them wrapped in a cocoon of tension. Every heartbeat echoed in her ears, saturating the silence that ensued. She gazed up at him, her skin prickling with uncertainty and fear. For a fleeting moment, the weight of potential heartbreak pressed down on her, but at the same time, the intensity of his eyes held a promise she couldn't deny. She trembled, torn between the lies she should say and the truth she wished she could scream. The vulnerability of the moment ignited a fiery resolve within her she could no longer pretend. Instead of answering his question, she leaned in, her heart racing to the rhythm of 1,000 unsaid words as she captured his lips with her own, finally surrendering to the truth that had simmered beneath the surface for far too long. The kiss was electric, sending shockwaves through them both, igniting a flame that would forever change the landscape of their hearts. In that single, breathless moment, everything blurred: the fear, the doubt, and especially the boundaries. It was just them, drowning in a tidal wave of longing, bursting through the walls they had each built around themselves. Here, in the quietness of an empty kitchen, they found solace in the truth they could no longer escape, forever altering the direction of the lives they had painstakingly woven together. As the waves gently lapped at their feet, the horizon painted a kaleidoscope of colors, mirroring the turmoil and hope in their hearts. Kate felt the warmth of Dylan's hand enveloping hers, a silent promise that echoed in the most vulnerable corners of her soul. With the sun sinking low, casting a golden hue around them, she realized that this moment was theirs alone, untethered from familial expectations and the weight of society's gaze. They had crossed a line into uncharted territory, where love distorted the lines of right and wrong, and yet, it felt so undeniably real. Dylan turned to her, his eyes reflecting the twilight, and quietly said that sometimes the most beautiful connections bloom in the least expected places. They shared a heartbeat in that fleeting moment, steeling themselves for the storm that might follow, knowing they had only begun to scratch the surface of their tangled emotions. As darkness enveloped the beach, they knew they were stepping into an exhilarating uncertainty, a future unbound by the past, where their love could either soar or shatter the very fabric of their family. The air thickened with the intoxicating scent of possibility, intertwining with their unspoken dreams of what could be, leaving a lingering sense of anticipation that hung like the stars in the night sky, each one representing a choice yet to be made, a path yet to be walked. With a hesitant but determined breath, Kate leaned closer, whispering her fears, and Dylan leaned in, promising to hold her fears and dreams alike. The future was still unwritten, and as they walked down the moonlit path, the thrill of newfound love danced like fireflies around them, hinting at secrets yet to unravel and challenges yet to face. As they took their first steps into the unknown, the waves carried their whispered vows away, a poignant reminder that love, in its wild and unpredictable beauty, could be both a sanctuary and a battlefield. The night was far from over, it was just the beginning of love, of identity, of a story that deserved to be told. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like and subscribe to Happiness of Love. That way, you won't miss any of our heartfelt romances. See you in the next love story.